Hi, my name's Carter. The last thing my mother ever said to me was, "You're a selfish mistake." My father? He cornered me in a hospital hallway and screamed, "You're letting your brother die!" All because I wouldn't hand over my kidney, like it was nothing. But the truth didn't need a scream. It came in 5 quiet words. Words that cracked their lies wide open. And now I wonder, was I wrong for finally saying no? Or had I just waited too long? Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this? And where are you? Drop a comment. We're reading every single one. The call came just after 5 a.m., slicing through the quiet like a blade. I didn't answer right away. The number flashed. Dad. It had been over 3 years since I'd heard his voice. 3 years of silence, of birthdays missed, of holidays passed like ghost towns. I let it ring until the voicemail kicked in, but no message came. Then, a second later, it buzzed again. This time, a text. "Micah's in the hospital. Kidney failure. Come now." No greeting, no, "How are you?" Just the command. By 8:40 a.m., I was pushing through the glass doors of Mercy Regional Medical Center, still gripping the car keys with white knuckles. The lobby smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. Outside, snowflakes had started to fall in that slow, silent way that makes everything feel even colder than it is. I spotted my mother first. She stood at the nurse's desk, her back straight, lips pursed, arms folded. Same haircut she'd had since I was 16, tight bob, not a strand out of place. Dad was beside her, jaw clenched, pacing. Neither of them looked like people who'd missed me. I approached with a slow breath, unsure how this would go after years of silence. "Hey," I said, voice low. "I got your text." Mom turned, gave me a once-over like I was a guest she didn't remember inviting. Dad didn't even greet me, just pointed toward the room down the hall. "He's in there." "We don't have time for a reunion." And that was it. No hug, no "thanks for coming," just urgency and frost. I followed them down the corridor, past rooms with muted beeps and quiet TVs. We stopped outside room 214. Inside, Micah looked pale, thinner than I remembered. He lay propped up, tubes in his arms, a nasal cannula feeding him oxygen. His eyes flicked toward me, but didn't stay. Aunt Deborah was seated beside him, gently patting his hand. Uncle Troy stood near the window, hands shoved in his coat pockets. My cousin Amber barely acknowledged me with a nod. I stood there, suddenly very aware of how out of place I felt, like I didn't belong in the same airspace, like I was there to deliver something, not to be with someone. Then Dad turned to me. "You'll donate," he said flatly, as if the decision had already been made and I was simply there to sign the papers. I blinked. "Donate?" He stepped closer, voice low but firm. "You'll get tested. See if you're a match." "Micah needs a kidney." I didn't know it was that serious. That's why we called. Don't waste time asking stupid questions. I looked to Mom for some context, maybe a bit of warmth. None. Just a cold stare. "After everything we've done for you," she said, "this is how you repay us?" I swallowed hard. "I'm not saying no, I'm just trying to understand." "There's nothing to understand," Dad snapped. "He's your brother." "I haven't seen you all in years," I said, my voice tight. "Now I'm suddenly a donor?" Mom took a step forward then, her voice soft in that dangerous way she always used when cornered. "You were never supposed to be born, Carter, but you were. So make yourself useful." The room went quiet. Even Aunt Deborah shifted uncomfortably. A nurse outside paused near the window and looked away quickly, pretending not to hear. The breath caught in my throat. I don't know what I expected, maybe anger, maybe guilt. But not that. Not the casual cruelty. Like it was a fact they'd accepted long ago and just forgot to mention. "I need a few days," I said quietly, "to think about it. Maybe talk to a doctor. Get more information." Micah's eyes narrowed. You'd let me die? I didn't say that. Dad's voice exploded then, echoing into the hallway. You're letting your brother die? You're that selfish? People turned. A nurse popped her head around the corner but didn't come in. I could feel every pair of eyes, relatives, hospital staff, strangers, drilling into me like I was some monster. Mom's voice came next. A blade. You're a selfish mistake. The hallway held its breath. Something cracked inside me then, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, like a plate sliding off a shelf and landing in thick carpet. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked out of the room, the weight of everything pressing down on my shoulders like wet cement. I paused near the nurse's station, trying to catch my breath. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly. On the wall beside me was a dry erase board showing notes and a printed patient chart. Out of habit, I work in billing and patient records. I scanned it, my eyes catching Micah's name. Blood type, AB. I froze. AB? That didn't make sense. I'm type O, always have been. My high school nurse flagged it during a routine blood drive and confirmed it twice. My donor card still sits in my wallet. AB? My brain stuttered, like a car missing a gear. I blinked again, reading the chart a second time, then a third. That's not possible. Not with our parents, not with both of them being O positive, like they always said. I turned back toward room 214, the voices still audible. Mom muttering something about family duty, Dad pacing like a caged animal. Carter stared at the chart again. Something about Micah's blood type wasn't just off, it was impossible. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out of that hospital like the walls were closing in. Outside, the snow was falling heavier now, blanketing the parking lot like some twisted version of peace. But inside my chest, nothing felt still. My boots crunched against the asphalt as I made my way to my car, each step faster than the last, like I could outrun the thought clawing its way into my head. Back at my apartment in Cleveland, I didn't turn on the lights, just dropped my keys on the kitchen counter and sank into the worn-out armchair near the window. My coat was still on. I didn't even realize I hadn't taken it off until I caught myself shivering. But it wasn't the cold. I pulled out my phone and searched. Can 2 O-positive parents have an AB child? The top result hit me like a punch to the gut. No. It's genetically impossible. I blinked, refreshed the page. Clicked a second link, then a third. Every one of them said the same thing. I leaned back and let my phone fall onto my lap. The silence in my apartment felt louder than the beeping monitors at Micah's bedside. If I'm O-negative, and I've always been told both Mom and Dad were O too, then how the hell is Micah AB? I stared out at the falling snow. The city lights across the street glowed behind the flakes, blurred like a memory I couldn't quite reach. You were never supposed to be born. Her words from that hospital room snapped back like a rubber band, stinging. And now, they felt like something more than just cruelty. I stood up slowly and made my way to the hall closet. In the back, behind the old tax folders and a shoebox of letters I never mailed, was a plastic storage bin marked medical. I sat cross-legged on the living room rug and pulled out the manila folder I'd kept since I was a teenager, old-school vaccination records, a copy of my birth certificate. Immunization chart. Then, there it was. Blood type, O-negative. Confirmed. I remembered the nurse who told me during the high school blood drive. She smiled, said, "You're the universal donor." I never thought twice about it again. Until now. I checked the timestamp. The form was signed when I was 11, updated after a round of allergy testing. No doubt about it. This was mine. I stood and walked over to the kitchen, phone in hand, and dialed the hospital's general line. After bouncing through menus, I got a live person. Her voice was chipper in the way you get from someone who's already dealt with too many calls in one shift. Mercy Regional Medical, this is Leanne. How can I help? Hi, I said carefully. I'm trying to get a copy of my brother's blood test. He's a patient in room 214, Micah Allen. Are you his physician or legal representative? No, I'm his brother. I'm sorry, we're not permitted to release that information unless the patient authorizes it directly or you're listed on his care team. But I'm family, I said. Immediate family. I understand, sir, but due to HIPAA regulations. Right, I cut her off, already knowing the answer. Thanks anyway. I hung up and stared at the fridge for a second like it owed me answers. Something about this wasn't right. I opened my text app and shot a message to Dad. What's Micah's blood type? I waited. No response. I tried again. Is he AB? Just checking something? Still nothing. I placed the phone face down on the counter and walked into the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. When I came back out, the screen had lit up. Why do you care? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then a second one came through. Focus on what matters. He needs you. I sat down, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then another message blinked in. You're overthinking. Don't dig into things that ruin families. There it was. I didn't even reply. My chest tightened, but I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something worse. Suspicious. Like I'd just tripped over the edge of something deeper than I realized. I stared at those texts until they blurred into the wallpaper. Then I grabbed my coat again and headed back out into the cold. The drive to Lakeview Clinic took 15 minutes. It was the place I'd gone to for checkups growing up, back when things were simpler, or maybe just when I didn't know better. The receptionist was a woman in her 60s with cropped gray hair and warm eyes behind thick glasses. I smiled politely. I was a patient here years ago, I said. Carter Allen. I was wondering if I could get a full copy of my childhood records. She typed for a minute, nodding. What year were you born? 1990. Another pause. Her fingers slowed. She said. Looks like your chart's here, but it's sealed. My brow furrowed. Sealed? She leaned forward and lowered her voice. Looks like someone signed off as your guardian a while back to restrict access. Says we're not supposed to release anything unless there's a court order. Who signed it? She shook her head slightly. Sorry, I'm not even supposed to be telling you that much. I stood there, nodding slowly. Okay, thanks. She hesitated. Then, quietly, she added, If something doesn't feel right, trust your gut, honey. I walked back out into the parking lot. The snow had slowed, but the sky still hung heavy above the buildings. I leaned against the hood of my car and took a deep breath. They sealed my file. My own medical history, locked away like it was dangerous. I'd never thought of myself as someone who got caught up in conspiracies or soap opera drama. But suddenly, the picture was shifting, and I wasn't sure where I fit in it anymore. I looked down at my hands, cold, trembling just slightly. They've hidden something, and I've let them. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth. But the deeper I looked, the more the walls started closing in. The next morning, I was behind the wheel before the sun even broke through the clouds. A low sky hung heavy over the empty highway as I made the hour-long drive west, toward Elyria. My hometown. The kind of place people leave and never talk about again. Except I couldn't seem to let it go. Not anymore. Not with this knot in my gut that wouldn't loosen. Snow from last night's storm still crusted the sidewalks and covered rooftops like a whitewash over memories I never wanted to dig up. I drove past shuttered shops with faded awnings, the diner where Mom used to bring us after church, and the same corner gas station that never updated its prices, or its lights. It all looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. When I turned down Harper Lane, I slowed to a crawl. The old Allen house sat at the edge of the cul-de-sac, just like always. Peeling shutters, same cracked driveway. Except now there was a new porch light, faintly glowing even in daylight. Someone was home. I didn't pull in. I just parked across the street and sat there with the engine idling. Through the window, I saw a shadow move in the front room. Dad, maybe. Or maybe it was Micah. For a brief second, I thought about knocking, asking flat out, but my hands didn't move. I just stared at that house like it might start speaking. After a few minutes, I put the car back in gear and pulled away. Downtown Elyria wasn't much. Just a few municipal buildings and a small courthouse that looked more like a post office. I parked, walked through the slush to the front steps, and pushed open the doors. It smelled like old paper and cheap coffee. The clerk at the window looked up as I approached. Her badge said Francine. She had a silver bun, thick glasses, and a no-nonsense look. "Hi there," I said with a polite nod. "I was hoping to get a copy of my birth certificate. I need it for work, insurance stuff." "Full copy or abstract?" she asked, already clicking through her screen. "Full, please." She nodded, asked my full name and birth date, and started typing. I glanced around as the printer behind her sat quiet. When she finally stopped typing, her fingers hovered over the keyboard. That sound made my stomach tighten. She adjusted her glasses. "Looks like your record's got a seal on it. From 1993. I blinked. "What does that mean?" She looked around, then lowered her voice. "Usually only happens with adoptions, sealed custody cases, or, sometimes, protection orders involving minors. It means we can't print the full file without a court order." My mouth was dry. "So, I can't even see my own birth certificate?" "Only the abstract," she said. "That's just your name, date, and place of birth. Basic info. But the full version, that's sealed." She started to say something else, then stopped. Her eyes softened just a little. "It doesn't happen often, not without a reason." I nodded slowly, unsure if I should thank her or scream. Back outside, I didn't feel the cold anymore. Not really. I just walked. Past the war memorial, past the frozen fountain, past a bench I remembered from high school afternoons when I'd sit there pretending I wasn't waiting to be picked up. I passed the library where I used to hide after Mom's chemo appointments. She'd sit in the car, exhausted, while I read books about biology and genetics, thinking maybe someday I'd understand why things happen the way they do. I kept walking until I reached a side street lined with skeletal trees. I sat down on a low wall and let the wind slap my face, hoping the cold would make me feel real again. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and stared at the screen. Aunt Lorna. She and Mom hadn't spoken in years. I didn't even know if she'd answer, but I hit call anyway. It rang. Once. Twice. Then a sleepy voice picked up. "Hello? Lorna, it's Carter." A pause. "Carter? Is everything okay?" "I just need to ask you something," I said, heart thudding. "And I need you to be straight with me. Please." "Okay," she said slowly. "Am I adopted?" Silence. I closed my eyes. "Just tell me what you know." She sighed, long and shaky. "I don't know everything, but what I do know. Your mom disappeared for almost 4 months in '87. Wouldn't say where she went. When she came back, she had a baby. You. And your dad. He looked at you like a ghost he didn't ask for." I didn't say anything. "You were a good kid," she went on. "Sweet, quiet, but there was always this tension, like no one wanted to talk about how you got there. I remember asking your mom once. She snapped, said, 'Don't go there, Lorna. Don't ever go there.'" My breath caught. "So they lied to me." "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "But it always felt like you were on the outside of something. I ended the call without saying goodbye. I sat there for a long time, not moving, just watching a single snowflake land on my glove and melt slowly into the fabric. I was never wanted. I wasn't planned. Maybe not even theirs. As I walked back to my car, everything felt distant, like I was watching someone else's life play out from a seat in the back. My phone buzzed again. Micah. What are you doing? Dad says you're stirring up trouble. Don't mess this up. Don't make us cut you off again. Again. That word stuck like a nail in my throat. So this wasn't new. They'd done it before. Played keep away with love. Cut me off like I was some excess limb they never needed. I stared at the screen, reread the message, then locked the phone and slid it back into my coat pocket. I didn't reply, but I knew one thing. I was never one of them. And now they were warning me not to find out why. I didn't reply to Micah's message. I just turned the phone screen off and sat in my car with the engine humming low, the air inside starting to fog from my breath. The wind outside whipped around the edges of the windshield, but my hands didn't move, not toward the heat dial, not toward the gear shift, just still, like I was trying to make time stop before it hurt more. Eventually, I drove back to Cleveland. The roads were mostly empty, the sun already dipping below the horizon. I didn't turn the radio on. I didn't need more noise. My head was loud enough. By the time I stepped back into my apartment, everything looked smaller, like the truth I'd dragged back with me had filled up the space. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my boots, and went straight to the hallway closet. I hadn't opened that top shelf box in years. It was a shoebox, taped at the corners, stuffed with old pictures, birthday cards, and brittle paper edges from a childhood that suddenly didn't feel like mine. I dumped it out onto the floor and began sifting. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. A church bulletin from St. Miriam's. It was yellowed, folded twice, and barely holding together. But my name, Carter Allen, was printed neatly in the corner under the Welcome to Our New Baptisms header. Then crossed out, a single black slash through it. Just once. No explanation. No reprint. Just a clean strike. I stared at it for a long time, then folded it and slipped it into my coat pocket. 30 minutes later, I was back in the car, heading to the church we hadn't set foot in since I was 16. The old building sat on the edge of a sleepy block, dark brick and stained glass windows glowing faintly from inside. A pastor's office sign hung on the door. I rang the buzzer and waited. A few moments passed before a short woman with thinning gray hair opened the door. She blinked at me behind thick glasses. "Evening," I said, flashing a polite smile. "I'm working on a genealogy project for my family, looking into baptism records. I was told this was where the Allen family used to attend." Her face softened at the word genealogy. Maybe she thought I was just another hobbyist tracing my roots. She nodded, pulling the door wider. "I can show you where we keep the archives. Follow me." The building smelled like old candles and lemon cleaner. She led me past a row of wooden pews, through a side hall, and into a tiny office with a bulky microfilm reader and rows of labeled drawers. "It's all here," she said. "You're welcome to take your time. Let me know if anything jams." I thanked her and sat down at the machine. My hands moved faster than my mind. I wasn't ready, but something in me didn't care anymore. I rolled through a few reels before I saw it. 2 entries, same page. Micah Allen, baptized July 1987. Parents, Daniel Simone Allen. And just beneath that, mine. Carter, baptized November 1987. Mother, Simone Allen. Father, TBD. A handwritten note just off to the side. Pending parental status, private. Private. My chest felt like someone had opened it and shoved ice inside. There it was, in black and white. I wasn't his son, not Daniel Allen's. I stared at those letters until they blurred, until the numbers and names swam together. But they didn't change. They stayed fixed, unapologetic. He's not mine. He's her mess. I remembered that night like a splinter. I'd been 13, sitting on the stairs when I overheard it. My father's voice in the kitchen, sharp and bitter. I thought maybe he meant my grades or my broken bike or the way I wasn't athletic like Micah. But now it was clear. I wasn't his, and I never had been. My mother had known. She baptized me at a different time, under a different rule. And she tried to give me something, a connection maybe, but she'd also kept it quiet, buried it under silence. I printed a copy of the record. My hands trembled as I folded it and slipped it into my bag. When I got back to the apartment, the streets were empty, snowlight casting a soft glow on the walls. Inside, everything was quiet, except for the buzzing thoughts in my head. I called Lorna again. She picked up after 2 rings. "Carter?" "I went to the church," I said. "I found it." She didn't ask what. I think she already knew. Why did she keep it hidden? My voice cracked a little. I hated that. Lorna sighed. "Your mother was stuck. That's the truth. She lied to me." "She was trying to survive," Lorna said quietly. "Simone told me once. Daniel gave her a choice. Pretend you were his, or lose everything. No more house, no more support. He'd leave, take Micah, and tell everyone she was some unstable woman who got herself knocked up by a stranger." I sat down on the couch. "And she chose him." "She chose the only thing she could live with," Lorna said. "She chose to keep you under a roof, to keep Micah safe. It wasn't right, Carter, but back then, she was scared." "Who was he? My real dad?" Lorna went quiet. She never said his name, but her face would change when she talked about him. Soft. Like something she lost, not something she regretted. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, pressing my palms together until they ached. "So I was the mistake." "No," Lorna said firmly. "You were the price." Later that night, I sat on the floor with the baptism paper in my lap. Micah texted again. "Just give the kidney. After that, you can disappear like you always do." Like I always do. The words sat heavy in my throat. I hadn't disappeared. I'd been erased. I whispered to the empty room. That's the problem. And I was never supposed to exist. And now, I was the only one left who could drag the truth out of hiding. This wasn't just a family secret. This was control. And I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. And the morning after I found the baptism record, everything felt brittle, like my world had been reassembled in silence, and the slightest sound might crack it again. I was sipping a bitter cup of gas station coffee when my phone rang. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me, it wasn't hope, more like suspicion, made me answer. "Mr. Allen, this is Tanya from the transplant coordination team at Lakeside Medical. Your family's informed us you're emotionally stable but possibly hesitant, so they've signed the waiver allowing us to move forward. We just need your final consent forms today to complete the surgical schedule." My hand tightened around the paper cup. "What waiver?" There was a short pause. "It's a competency waiver, sir. Your parents filed it on your behalf. It gives us permission to proceed assuming your emotional consent." I stood up so fast I nearly knocked the chair over. "I didn't sign anything." "And I sure as hell didn't give them that kind of access." Tanya's voice flattened. "The waiver was attached to a power of attorney document filed several years ago. The hospital legal team has accepted it as valid." I didn't say goodbye. I just hung up. By the time I pulled into the hospital's underground parking garage, my hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from the kind of fury that makes your whole body vibrate. I marched straight to the transplant administration desk. The woman behind the counter gave a tight-lipped smile. "Can I help?" I want to see the file under Carter Allen, I said, voice steady but low. I need to know what documents you've got on me. She glanced at her screen. Are you the recipient or the donor? My jaw clenched. Neither, apparently. A younger nurse passing by must have overheard. She hesitated, then nodded to a side hallway. Come with me. Quietly. We ended up in a small consultation room with a folding chair and a motivational poster about the gift of giving. She pulled the door half closed. You had a medical episode in college, right? A panic attack or something? I stared. That was 15 years ago, after my mom's funeral. She looked uncomfortable. Your father filed a durable medical power of attorney right after that, said it was to make sure you were looked after. It gives them decision-making authority in any family-related medical matters if there's emotional concern. Are you serious? I asked, stunned. He used a panic attack to steal my legal rights? The nurse just nodded. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but this isn't the first time I've seen families do this, usually when there's a transplant involved, especially when emotions get murky. I didn't trust myself to speak. Instead, I stood, walked out of the room, straight into the coordinator's office. Tanya was behind her desk, tapping on a keyboard. She looked up, mildly surprised. Mr. Allen, cancel the surgery, I said. Whatever schedule you've got, tear it up. I'm afraid that's not entirely in your hands, she replied coolly. As I mentioned earlier, you're listed under guardianship consent due to previous evaluations. I was 19, I snapped. I didn't need a guardian. I needed time to grieve. She folded her hands. We just need to go through a quick screening to verify everything. 5 minutes. A hospital psychiatrist will just ask you a few questions, Carter. I felt like I was being herded like cattle. Still, I followed, because if they were going to keep up this charade, I wanted to watch it fall apart face to face. They put me in another room. The door clicked shut behind me. 15 minutes passed before a balding man in a white coat stepped in, clipboard in hand. Carter, I'm Dr. Schulman, he said, with that soft, patronizing voice therapists use when they've already decided who you are. I understand there's been some stress lately. You could say that, I muttered. He took a seat across from me. Let's just walk through a few questions. Do you often feel isolated or misunderstood by your family? I looked at him. You mean the people who forged my consent to steal a piece of my body? Yeah. I feel a little isolated. He didn't blink, just scribbled. Do you believe your memories may be influenced by emotional trauma or unreliable narratives? Do you? I shot back. Because mine are pretty clear. They left me out of the will, lied about who I am. Now they want to cut into me for a man who hasn't spoken to me in years unless he needs something. He set the clipboard down, gently. No one's forcing you, Carter. We just want to ensure you're making a sound decision. I stood up. This isn't an evaluation. It's a performance. You're not checking my capacity. You're just trying to see if I'll stay quiet. Please sit, he said, slightly firmer now. No, I said. You already wrote your ending. I'm not playing the part. I walked out. Back in my apartment, I slammed the door shut and went straight for the back closet, the one I hadn't touched in a decade. My mother's boxes were still there, packed the week after her funeral, never opened. In one of them, buried under an old shawl, I found it. A thick beige envelope labeled in Simone's handwriting. Legal. Private. Inside was a stack of papers. On top, durable power of attorney. Carter Allen. Filed 12 years ago. Signed by both my parents. No expiration. No amendments. There was a small yellow sticky note attached. My mother's cursive was shaky, like she'd written it in a hurry. Forgive me. I'm keeping you protected. This is only in case Daniel pushes too far. I sat on the floor, holding the paper like it might start burning. My mother, who whispered bedtime stories and clipped coupons and stood between me and Dad's outbursts. She did this too. Maybe she meant well. But that's the thing about protection. Sometimes it's just another word for control. My phone buzzed. A voice message from Micah. He sounded casual, mocking. "You always wanted to be seen. Now you're the center of attention." Happy? I stared at the screen, typed out a reply I would never send. No. I wanted to be loved. You just needed a donor. I hit delete, then stood. If they saw me as a tool, I'd show them what happens when the tool learns to build and destroy. I left the apartment that morning without telling anyone where I was going. The sun hadn't burned off the haze yet, and Cleveland's sidewalks were still wet from overnight drizzle, the kind that doesn't bother wiping off. It just clings to your sleeves like guilt. I drove downtown in silence. No music, no calls, just the kind of stillness that follows you when there's nothing left to scream about. The legal aid office was tucked into a brownstone near the corner of East 30th and Prospect, wedged between a shuttered dry cleaner and a nail salon with a handwritten cash-only sign on the door. I parked out front, fed the meter 2 hours' worth of quarters, and went inside. The receptionist didn't even look up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's urgent," I said, holding up the envelope. "I need to talk to someone about revoking a medical power of attorney that never should have existed." She glanced over, sighed, then nodded toward a row of chairs. "Take a seat." "I'll see if someone's available." I sat beneath a flickering fluorescent light, the kind that buzzes just loud enough to keep your thoughts from settling. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Eventually, a young woman stepped out of the back, clipboard in hand. She wore jeans under a blazer, and her hair was pulled back in a tight bun that somehow made her look more awake than the rest of us. "Carter Allen?" I stood. She smiled, quick and professional. "I'm Mia Kaplan. Let's talk." She led me down a narrow hallway into an office the size of a storage closet. One window, one desk, 2 chairs, and stacks of red folders threatening to tip over. I sat across from her. "This'll be messy." She nodded. "That's usually how the good ones start." I handed her the document. The original POA, signed by my father, co-signed by my mother, notarized like it had been a formality. It might as well have been a leash. Mia read silently, her eyes scanning fast, her lips pressed tight. "This was never revoked," she finally said, "but under Ohio statute we can argue that the original basis, mental or emotional incompetence, no longer applies, especially since you've had no ongoing treatment and have maintained independent living for over a decade." "They used a panic attack from college," I said. "One. That's enough for some families," she murmured, "especially when there's something to gain." She tapped her pen against the edge of her desk. "We can file a motion to suspend the POA immediately. Emergency injunction. It won't revoke it yet, but it stops them from making any further decisions while the case is reviewed." I nodded. "Do it." She pulled a blank form from her drawer, clipped it to a board, and slid it across. "Sign here. And here." I signed without blinking. When we stood to leave, she paused at the door. "Can I ask you something?" I looked over. Why go through this much trouble? For people who clearly don't care? I didn't answer right away. And my hand rested on the doorknob, frozen. "Because I still wanted them to care," I said, "until last week." Outside, the sun had climbed higher, but it didn't feel warmer. The air was sharp, unforgiving, and I breathed it in like a dare. I drove slowly through the east side, past the neighborhood I used to ride my bike through as a kid, past the park with the broken swing set and the corner store where Mom used to get me ginger ale on Saturdays. Then I pulled onto Larchwood Avenue. The house looked the same. White vinyl siding, brown shutters, the same uneven brick path to the door. My father had always refused to fix it, said it built character to trip now and then. I parked but didn't cut the engine for a long while. When I finally knocked, it was my mother who opened the door. Her eyes flinched when she saw me, but she stepped aside without a word. I walked into the living room. My father sat on the recliner, remote in hand, TV blaring golf highlights even though he never played a day in his life. "Well," he said, not looking up, "I hope you've finally come to your senses." I let the silence hang. Then, "Sure, let's call it clarity." He glanced at me then, but only briefly. My mother stood by the archway to the kitchen. She didn't speak. She didn't meet my eyes. "I just came to pick up some things," I said, heading toward the hallway. "If that's okay." No one stopped me. My old room was still there, down the hall, third door on the left. The handle stuck the same way it always had. You had to lift and push at the same time. Everything was preserved like a museum. Old soccer trophies lined the shelf. My high school diploma in a crooked frame. The same navy blue bedspread from when I was 17. But the photo on the nightstand wasn't of me. It was Micah. 8 years old, missing a front tooth, grinning wide like the world owed him something, and he was just waiting for the delivery. I sat on the edge of the bed, let my eyes wander. Then I noticed it, a crumpled envelope tucked beneath the photo frame. Old, yellowed, unopened. I pulled it out carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's. I slid the letter from the envelope, unfolded it with hands that shook even though I didn't feel cold. "I named you Carter because it means the one who carries. I never wanted you to carry this. I'm sorry." That was all. No date. No signature. Just those lines. As if that was all she had the courage to say. I folded it slowly, pressed it flat, slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't take anything else. Back in the living room, I passed them both without a word. No one asked what I'd found. No one asked what I was thinking. At the door, I turned once. My mother's hands were twisting in front of her. My father hadn't moved. "I'll see you around," I said softly. Neither responded. I drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there I needed to see again. Halfway down the block, I whispered to myself, steady and low, "Let's see how they handle truth without a shield." And I didn't rush out of that house. I walked, slow and measured, like every step was an answer to a question I didn't need to hear anymore. I didn't turn around, not even once. By the time I made it back to my apartment, the sky had bruised purple. I turned the key, stepped inside, and closed the door like I was sealing off the past with it. Then I stood still for a moment, just long enough to let it all hit. I hadn't cried in a long time, not even when they signed away my rights, not when Micah took my mother's attention like it was owed to him, not when my father said, "Don't act like you're owed anything. You were lucky we even kept you." But that night, as I pulled out the letter she wrote, buried under Micah's photo in my old room, I sat on the edge of the bed and let the weight settle. I didn't sob. Just let the silence stretch out around me like it was finally big enough to hold the truth. The next morning, I called Mia. She picked up on the first ring. "I was just about to call you." I got straight to it. "Let's go forward. Full ethics board review. We bring everything." She was already moving. "Meet me at the office at 10. I'll print everything we need." By noon, we were sitting across from 5 board members in a small windowless conference room at the hospital. The kind of room where lives got quietly rewritten. Mia started. She laid out the timeline, the misuse of my power of attorney, signed under false claims of mental instability. She handed them my complete medical history, clean, stable, consistent, no signs of any condition that would warrant removing my legal rights. She slid over the evaluation transcript they'd used, an informal interview from a campus counselor, never meant for formal diagnosis. And then she gave them the real kicker, the baptismal certificate. "My client is Carter Daniel Allen," Mia said, voice calm and firm. There's no dispute on bloodlines. But what's more important, this wasn't about kinship. This was about coercion. A family created false narratives to pressure someone into a life-threatening donation, and the hospital nearly allowed it. One of the board members, a woman in her 60s with a long silver braid and reading glasses perched on her head, leaned forward. Is it true the family used a psychiatric evaluation from over 15 years ago? Mia nodded. The older woman turned to me. Why come forward now? I didn't look away. Because I didn't want to believe my family would do something like this. But when someone tries to carve out pieces of your body without your consent, that's a line. A younger board member, a man with thick-framed glasses, looked up from the papers. Your brother, Micah Allen, he received a regional humanitarian award last year, didn't he? I almost laughed. Yeah, for organizing a coat drive. Ask him what he does behind closed doors. There was a long silence. Then someone finally spoke. We're suspending the transplant process effective immediately and revoking the POA, pending a full investigation. Mia gave me a small nod. We walked out without saying anything more. I was back in my apartment by evening, exhausted, but not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. I took a shower, poured a glass of water, let the quiet settle again. Then my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Micah. I let it play on speaker. His voice was sharp, strangled with anger. You ruined my only shot. I can't believe you do this to your own family. What the hell is wrong with you? I stared at the phone, then picked it up and typed 2 words. Your shot? Sent. Typed again. You mean my body? Sent. He didn't reply. That weekend, our family's church held their annual community donor celebration. Big turnout. Folks I hadn't seen in years. Choir members, old neighbors, former teachers. I hadn't planned on going. But something in me shifted when I saw their names printed on the program, the Allen family, honored guests. I put on a clean button-down and dark jeans, nothing flashy, just enough to walk in and be seen. When I stepped inside the community hall, a few heads turned, a few smiles, some surprise. Carter? Mrs. Lanning said, eyes wide. My goodness, you've grown into your father's face. I smiled politely. Nice to see you, ma'am. I made my way to the side of the room, near the snack table. The air was thick with potluck casseroles and forced cheer. Micah was up front, standing near our parents. Simone wore a peach dress and too much blush. My father stood stiffly, a hand in his pocket, watching the room like he owned it. When his eyes met mine, something flickered. He moved fast, strode across the floor toward me, jaw tight. I didn't flinch. He grabbed my arm, his voice low and biting. You shouldn't be here. I raised my voice, not a shout. Just enough for the closest circle of people to hear. You want to talk now? Or should I tell everyone how you forged medical documents to try and cut out my kidney? The silence rippled. He blinked. Keep your voice down. I kept it down for 30 years, I said. Look where that got me. A woman near the dessert table dropped her cup. A spoon clinked to the floor. Simone stepped forward, her face drained. Carter, please, this isn't the place. Micah turned, glaring. Are you really doing this? In church? You mean after what you did in a hospital? He opened his mouth, then closed it, then turned and walked out. I stepped toward the podium, not to take a shot, but to say what needed to be said. Everyone stared. I cleared my throat. I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to shame anyone. But I need to say something before I can move forward with my life. A pause. When you grow up feeling like a mistake, you start believing it's true. You let people take things, your time, your voice, even your body, because you think that's what love looks like. Another pause. My voice was steady now. But I learned something. The mistake wasn't mine. It never was. I stepped down, nodded once. Then I walked out the back door into the cool air. I didn't look back, and I didn't plan to destroy them. But I wasn't going to protect what destroyed me, either. The next morning felt strangely quiet. Not in the peaceful way. More like the kind of quiet you get after a long, bitter storm. That silence where nothing's really settled, but everything's been exposed. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, still in yesterday's jeans, when my phone lit up with Mia's name. "Carter," she said as soon as I picked up. "I just got a probate notice. There's something unexpected. A separate will." I sat up straighter. "Wait, what do you mean, a separate will?" "It's from your mother. She had her own estate." I blinked, gripping the phone tighter. "Simone had her own?" "Yes. And it looks like she set it up without your father ever knowing. The notice came from a different attorney's office, Janice Cole, down on Piedmont. She handled your mom's private affairs. They want to schedule a reading, today, if you're available." I didn't even hesitate. "Tell them I'll be there." After I ended the call, I just sat there. The sunlight was barely making its way through the window blinds, casting thin stripes across the floor. A part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake. Another part already knew. Deep down, I had always known there was something my mother never got to say. By late morning, I was sitting in a narrow office with fake leather chairs and a view of a gas station across the street. The lawyer, Janice Cole, had kind eyes and a no-nonsense energy. She offered me tea, which I declined, and then slid a folder across the table. "This is going to feel like a lot," she said softly. "So let's go through it slowly." I nodded. She opened the folder and pulled out a document. "Your mother, Simone Allen, created a private trust. She named you the sole beneficiary. She instructed that it remain undisclosed to your father. It was protected under a personal LLC she formed in her maiden name before the marriage." I blinked again. She's hid an entire estate?" "She protected it," Janice said gently. "There's a difference. But this wasn't just about the assets. She left you something specific." Janice reached into the folder again and pulled out a small envelope and a key attached to a worn green tag. "She rented a storage unit under the name Simone R. Brooks. Here's the address. The key opens Unit 142. I stared at the label taped to the envelope. In Simone's handwriting, it read, "For when you feel unloved." I didn't say much. I just took the key, folded the paper, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. "Do I need to sign anything?" I asked quietly. "You will," she said, "but only after you've seen what she left for you." The sun had moved west by the time I pulled into the gravel lot behind an aging storage facility. The paint on the main office was peeling, and the keypad barely registered my code the first time. I found Unit 142 tucked into the far end, just past a dented soda machine and a stack of broken pallets. My hands were shaking as I fit the key into the lock. It clicked open with a sound that felt too loud for the quiet afternoon. The unit was small, maybe 8 by 10, and mostly empty. Just one metal box sitting on a folded blanket and a manila envelope taped to the side. I knelt down. Inside the envelope were photos. Me, as a baby. My mother in a hospital bed, holding me with a tired smile. A yellowed birth certificate with my name written clearly, Carter Daniel Allen. Tucked underneath was a bank slip from a local credit union, a savings account. My name. Opened 15 years ago. Never touched. I reached for the metal box and opened the latch. Inside was a cassette tape, labeled in black marker, Carter, don't listen yet. There were more documents, copies of letters, signed forms, her original will, and a full breakdown of the trust account she'd quietly built over the years. The total wasn't enormous, but it was real, and it was mine. She had tried to leave me something that Daniel couldn't touch. But tucked at the very bottom of the box was the part that changed everything: a court filing. Daniel Allen had submitted a joint marital property claim just weeks after Simone's passing, right before the probate. A blanket claim on all shared assets, including anything not specifically designated outside the marriage. He'd done it fast, quiet, before any of this came to light. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the filing. So that was it. He tried to erase this, too. I pulled out the old cassette player I still kept in my closet, left over from college, mostly used for old music, and popped in the tape. I had to rewind it. The machine whirred softly, then clicked. And then, her voice. "Hi, baby," she said. It cracked right through me. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry I didn't do more while I was here." I didn't move, just sat on the floor of my apartment, one hand over my mouth. I let them tell me you'd be safer if I stayed quiet, if I gave Daniel control. I thought, maybe if he had everything he wanted, he wouldn't take more from you. But I was wrong. I saw it. Every time he gave Micah the best, every time he blamed you for things that weren't yours, I saw it. And I said nothing. I thought I was protecting you, but I was only protecting my own fear. Her voice wavered. "You were never a mistake. You were the only thing that kept me breathing through the worst years of my life. And if you're hearing this, then maybe I've finally done one thing right." I didn't cry, not in the sobbing kind of way. I just felt everything loosen at once, like my lungs remembered how to breathe. Like something had been gripping my chest for 3 decades and finally let go. When the tape clicked to an end, I just sat there, eyes closed, letting the silence settle around me. I didn't call anyone, didn't text Mia. I just stayed in that space, letting it wash over me. The next day, I walked into Janice's office again. She looked up from her desk. "You ready?" I nodded. "Let's file the challenge." She didn't ask if it was revenge, and I didn't offer a reason. It wasn't about punishing Daniel anymore. It wasn't even about money. It was about truth, about saying, "You don't get to rewrite me out of my own life." I signed the paperwork, dated it. When I left the office, I stepped out into the sun without flinching, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was walking in someone else's shadow. I wasn't his tool. I wasn't her shield. I was just me. And that was enough. The hall outside the conference room smelled like antiseptic and weak coffee. A nurse rolled a cart of empty trays past me, while a volunteer taped a flyer on the bulletin board for some blood drive next Tuesday. Life moved on in this hospital, no matter how broken the people walking through it were. But inside that room, the air had changed. The ethics board had reconvened at Cleveland General, and this time it felt heavier. No lawyers, no performative outrage, just seats filled with people who knew what it meant to carry decisions that could not be undone. I sat across from Dr. Henriksen, the transplant coordinator, who had dodged the truth for weeks. But not today. Mia sat beside me, calm and still. On the other side of the room was Daniel, arms folded, eyes narrowed. He hadn't said a word to me since I filed the paperwork challenging his claim. He probably thought I'd show up angry, flailing, giving him something to mock, but I wasn't there for him. The board chair, a woman in her 50s with silver braids and the kind of face that told you she'd seen too much, cleared her throat. "Dr. Henriksen, we'll need your final statement for the record." The doctor adjusted his glasses, his fingers trembling slightly. He reached for the folder on the table and opened it with a soft thump. "After internal review," he began, "and with confirmation from our transplant team and third-party evaluation," he looked up, right at me, "we're closing the case." He paused, took a breath, then read, "The patient was never eligible." You could feel the ripple before the words even finished settling. But then he added, calmly, plainly, Micah Allen is not compatible. No one breathed. You could hear the subtle click of a pen dropping. Whispers stirred at the edges of the room. Someone finally spoke, a man in a blazer and glasses halfway down his nose. Why wasn't this disclosed during initial recommendation? The doctor looked right past him, and then, deliberately, turned his head toward Daniel. Ask his father. Daniel's jaw clenched. His face didn't move, but the color drained just slightly. No more denials. No twisting of facts. Just 5 words, and then silence. I stood slowly. Didn't say a word. Didn't thank anyone. Didn't gloat. Just looked at Mia and nodded. We're done here. Outside the room, the world kept spinning. Patients in wheelchairs, doctors walking briskly, monitors beeping down the hallway. But I walked through it differently this time. No weight on my shoulders, no dread in my chest. Just her voice in my mind, soft and steady. If you're hearing this, maybe you are. I drove to the cemetery late that afternoon. The sun was low, casting long shadows between the headstones. The wind was light, warm for once. Her marker was simple, just her name, no grand verse, no quotes. I knelt down and placed the cassette box gently in the soil beside the flowers. You should have run with me, I whispered. But I understand why you didn't. My fingers brushed the grass as I leaned closer. I forgive you. The words didn't feel dramatic. They weren't meant to sting or heal anyone but me. Saying them out loud was like finally exhaling after years of holding my breath. As I turned to go, I didn't look back. I made it halfway across the parking lot before I heard his voice behind me. This is what you wanted? Daniel's tone was tight, bitter. To tear this family apart? I stopped, turned, met his eyes. No, I said, quiet but clear. I just stopped pretending it was a family. His mouth opened like he was ready to argue, to toss blame like breadcrumbs. But I didn't give him the stage. I turned and walked away. By the time I got back to my apartment, dusk had started to fade into evening. The building felt quiet. Maybe it always had, but I noticed it more now. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and paused for a moment. Same couch, same shelves, same framed picture of a younger me with Mom on a beach somewhere I barely remembered. But something was different. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. I made tea, out of habit, not need, and sat on the edge of the couch. Let the mug warm my hands while I stared at nothing in particular. A soft knock came at the door. It was Mia. She held a small envelope. These came to the office, she said, stepping in. From Simone's sister. No note. Just this. She handed it to me. Inside were a handful of photographs, some faded, others newer. One caught my eye right away. My mother holding me as a baby. Not the Simone I remembered. This smile was real. Eyes crinkled, no tension in her face. I touched the edge of the photo with my thumb. For a long time, I thought I had to prove I was worthy of love. Be useful. Be forgiving. Be quiet. But maybe the cruelest lie is thinking you ever have to earn what should be freely given. I didn't walk away from my family. I walked back to myself. Do you think I was wrong for finally choosing myself, or was it just overdue?